departs.
All right, we just saw President Trump wrapping up his first solo news conference in over a year. President Trump covering a lot of ground there. He did talk about foreign policy. After all, he was at the UN. But most of the questions, as you saw there towards the end, were about Brett Kavanaugh and that scheduled hearing tomorrow. The president called Brett Kavanaugh one of the highest quality human beings, an outstanding man. President Trump also talked about some of the, he says, false statements and accusations made against him in relation to sexual misconduct. As we mentioned, he did talk about foreign policy. After all, this was at the UN. He made a comment about health care being a tougher negotiation than the Israeli-Palestinian peace deal. He also talked about Chinese election meddling. But of course, again, the main topic was Brett Kavanaugh. He called this hearing tomorrow a very big cultural moment for our country. And he said he looks forward to hearing what both Judge Brett Kavanaugh has to say, as well as his accuser, Christine Blasey Ford. All right. As we mentioned, Judge Brett Kavanaugh is scheduled to testify tomorrow in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee regarding the accusations by Christine Blasey Ford, who, of course, alleges Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her when they were both in high school 36 years ago. This, as a new accuser, Julie Swetnick came forward today claiming in a sworn declaration that Kavanaugh and his friends purposely targeted girls with spiked beverages so they could, quote, gang rape them. That's the term she used. And joining me now to discuss all this is Larry Klayman. He's a former federal prosecutor and the founder of Freedom Watch. Larry, it was a very sporty press conference. President Trump, no holds barred on the questions. Talk to me about how you think he handled all those Kavanaugh questions.
I think he handled them very well, John. He's put behind the spotlight there. They're trying to back him up against the wall. As usual, CNN was extremely disrespectful, and he left his mind open as to how he would ultimately find with regard to Judge Kavanaugh. But yes, everybody who's experienced this kind of thing is obviously going to project, and the president has been falsely accused in the past. We're not talking about Stormy Daniels or Playboy Bunny. We're talking about accused of sexual abuse, and it's never been shown that he's done any of that. So it was a legitimate question to ask, and I thought he answered it the right way. Is that obviously you draw from your own personal experience. Everybody does.
Sure. All right, let's talk about tomorrow's expected testimony. What do you think we're going to hear from Kavanaugh and his accuser?
What I think you're going to hear from Kavanaugh is the same thing. It's going to be a very short denial. He's not going to want to get into specifics, and he's going to take the same stand that he's taken so far. Now, as far as the accuser, we don't know how that's going to be, but we do know that there's been a lot of time that's ticked off since she came forward. She's had a lot of time to prepare. I'm sure she's going to be orchestrated. This is really going to depend on demeanor more than what's said, because they're both going to say what either side wants them to say, because they're coached. But how you assess their credibility is extremely important. And I was noting, the other day with the interview that Judge Kavanaugh gave, his eyes weren't going back and forth. They weren't shifty. I thought he was very believable. And we'll see how this woman fares under the spotlight, the pressure that she's under.
Yeah, there's been mixed reaction to that Fox News interview with Brett Kavanaugh. But tomorrow, of course, is a much different story, and it really means something. The Senate Judiciary Committee, as we mentioned, they're scheduled to vote on Kavanaugh's nomination this Friday, just one day after the testimony. Do you think the vote should be delayed given some of this new information that's come to light today?
I think it probably should, for the Republicans' own benefit. We don't know the truth. All the stuff about you don't do an FBI background check or investigation, that's simply false. Okay, the Democrats are really, excuse the word, prostituting it up, but the Republicans aren't coming forward with the truth either. The FBI does these kinds of background checks. They did it to me when I was a Justice Department lawyer. They talk to your friends. They've put forth information. So, yeah, I do think there needs to be a little more time, but the Senate should vote in full by the end of next week. Let them hear from these other people. Let the American people judge. And I think it's going to be good, John, because, there have been so many false allegations by elements of the Me Too movement. Some are legitimate, like with Cosby, like with Harvey Weinstein and others, but most of it is not. And it's good for the American people now to see this exposed as to what we're going through these days, that anytime you don't agree with somebody, you're either a sexist, misogynist, or a racist. And we can't have that continue in this country if we're going to survive.
All right. We're also going to get Bill O'Reilly's take on this later in the show. And let's move on now and talk about the much anticipated meeting tomorrow as well between President Trump and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. President Trump talked about this a little bit in the news conference as well. Larry, we've heard reports that President Trump is thinking about keeping Rosenstein on the job, at least for now. What do you expect will go down in the meeting tomorrow? I
think it's going to be more cosmetic, and this is unfortunate. the president, who's someone who does something on principle most of the time, is bending to principle, apparently, and allowing this guy to continue. I mean, how could Caesar have allowed Brutus to stay in the Roman Senate? I mean, just one example is that even if he was joking, this is not something that you can allow to happen. And Rosenstein has done so many other things that are inappropriate, rubber stamping everything that Special Counsel Robert Mueller wants, being involved in signing off on that famous, or should I say infamous, FISA warrant. I can go on and on and on. The president should use this as an opportunity to get rid of him, to have him leave, to demand his resignation, and have somebody take control of the so-called witch hunt that's going to do it fairly and get it done quickly. So he should not miss this opportunity. Advice by some people on other networks, I think, are just simply incorrect.
All right, Larry, as always, it's great to see you. We'll check back in with you after all the drama tomorrow. It's going to be a busy day. We know you'll be watching. We look forward to talking to you.
Thank you.